Institute of Product Leadership is Asia's first business school providing accredited degree programs and certification courses in product management, product leadership, data science, design, strategy, and leadership. The institute has partnered with three universities in India and the University of Houston in the United States. The institute was founded in 2012 with a singular mission of creating 10,000 product leaders in the country. Ever since, the organization has designed and delivered programs in collaboration with various institutes, universities, and corporates to the senior working professionals to help them make career transitions into product leadership. The Institute has built and developed a community of over 3,700 plus successful alumni, leading the product, data, and design teams across the world. We're also knowledge partners for 250 plus organizations worldwide. You can find out more about the institutes and the programs offered on our website. Please check the chat window for the link. And for those of you who have joined us through LinkedIn, please check the comments for the link. Today's session is on building and scaling a compliant Fintech SaaS product. Once our speaker for today presents his insights, we'll open up for questions. You can keep your questions ready or you can post them on Zoom in the Q&A section. This session is being streamed live on LinkedIn, YouTube, Facebook, and Twitter. So viewers on any of these channels, please feel free to post your questions in the comments and we will share them with the speaker. You can engage with our esteemed speaker with some good and intriguing questions. All right, then, let me kickstart this session by welcoming and introducing today's speaker, Mr. Gautam Mahesh. Gautam is currently the Senior Vice President of Product and AMP Partnerships at Decentro, a financial infrastructure platform, and he manages the entire product banking business globally. Prior to this, he has set up and led product teams across multiple organizations and scaled consumer and SME fintech products in the lending domain. Overall, he has more than 10 years of experience in the product domain and around 12 years in the fintech BFSI space, spanning lending, payments, insurance, and SaaS. A very warm welcome to you, Gautam. We're thrilled to have you here with us today. I hope you're doing well.
Yeah. Hey, Darlene, thanks for the warm welcome. Yeah, doing great.
Great to
Great
hear. The
time to be
session is
heard
now
as
yours.
well.
Let me just stop sharing my
Cool.
screen.
Yeah, I think Harleen, should we do the poll so that we'll get a sense of our great audience. So good evening, everyone. This is God. Uh, so broadly, I'll be kind of trying to cover how do you go about building a fintech SaaS product. So I'll be starting off with the illustration of a payments product. Disclaimer, a lot of what I'll be covering is real, but a lot of it is obviously massaged with a lot of fictitious things. So what would really help me is if you can fill up the poll so that I get a sense of your inclination, your prior experience, etc. Yeah, so I'll just take a minute. I'll just want to scan through the answers, so I'll just take this. Awesome. Cool. I see. I mean, it's a mix, but looks pretty good in terms of. So I see a lot of you have actually engaged or worked with payment service providers. You've been in a product role and all. So this is great. I'll share my screen. Right. Cool. So broadly, I'll quickly start off a bit. I think Harleen did most of the honors, so I'm not going to do much about talking about myself. So I'll just stick to basics. So what exactly I do in the company, professionally speaking, basically, as a product manager, somebody in this business, so my job is to be basically chasing people, including internal and external stakeholders, etc. Building fast, breaking fast, learning fast. That's kind of the motto in my professional life that's been doing. As a product manager, you got to ask some really, really hard questions, right? So that's the job title. And always looking at metrics, trying to prioritize, hard prioritize, force rank things as it is, right? So that's in a nutshell what I do. Okay, cool. The poll is done. Great. Got a sense. Thank you. And sorry. So what do I do apart from that? Basically, yeah, I'm basically a doting father. I basically trying to be a good husband, like most men around here, there. So yeah, still trying to keep up with my parents' expectations in life. And yeah, I am a bibliophile. I try to catch up on books, not just product, even fiction, fantasy. And whenever I don't get time after all of this, I try to catch up with friends and family, etc. Right. So what do I do actually? Basically, as already covered, I can look at all the products that kind of get shipped out of Decentro, and I look at the kind of banking side of things, a lot of things from the compliance, legal, a lot of these things from a regulatory perspective as well. Educationally speaking, I am a techie engineer. Started off, did my MBA from MDI Gurgaon, and been in the product space from day one, pre and post B school. Kind of mostly I'm a product thinker, mostly always thinking from first principle, asking hard questions, can get, become a techie if required. And when nobody's asking, I'm thinking being a firefighter, right? So cool. So I'll start off basically at an overview of, since I saw a mixed audience, what is, so because there are a lot of elements, there's B2B, there is SaaS, and there is fintech, and then obviously the illustration which goes mostly around the payment side. So SaaS, most of you would be aware, is pretty much all around you, right? So software as a service where everything is hosted or managed by a partner or a provider or an application, right? So Zoom is a classic example of a SaaS product. Most of you would have used a product like Jira, Trello, etc., or even a Gmail for that matter, your Microsoft 365, pretty much your SaaS product. So most of us tend to interact or use SaaS products in some way, form factor or the other. Though in India it is still a nascent and it's kind of still going, ramping up. One level going deeper is B2B SaaS. So B2B is basically business to business. So typically so wherever the buyer is a business, and when I say business, I don't really refer to like your very, very small, set of people, but proper, not a retailer kind of business, but a more incorporate structure business like IPL is, right? So basically, if a company is trying to sell something to a business, that's kind of what we're looking at B2B in terms of a SaaS. So typically, all your products, I was talking about G Suite, your AWS, your Azure, your Intercom, Google Analytics. These are typically B2B SaaS, right? So these are products which most of you would have seen in the market, experienced that as well a lot, since I see quite a few of you have, product background. Now within this basically is where the domain gets, things get more inside, in terms of fintech. So what exactly when we say in fintech? So these are companies which basically help you launch consumer or SME facing products in the BFSI space, but more tech or a product led flavor. Right? So this, from a domain, this could be payments, it could be lending, it could be insurance, it could be deposits, accounts opening, could be anything. So typically, most of the fintechs you tend to see in the market, like your Phone Pay, Google Pay, or your Paytms, or the likes of Zero, in the back end really are piggybacking on a bunch of, B2B SaaS companies, like my own current employer, which is Decentro. So before we jump into more nitty-gritties, just want to cover what's a payment gateway, right? And also rationally, logically also want folks to also ask questions if you have before we go into the masterclass, primarily because the SaaS product in this question is a payment gateway that we're trying to build and see how it works. So what is a payment gateway? A lot of you would have interacted, actually used, but really mostly it's a terminology used very commonly in the payments business. So payment gateway, or a PG as I'll be mostly using, is a processor or an intermediary who processes payments, right, on behalf of a merchant, right? So typically when you're shopping on a Amazon, you're shopping on a Zomato, you're shopping on, you're paying something on a Uber, you would have seen either it is default, these merchants or these platforms, they are directly using their own stack, or they work with somebody third party to accept payments. Now, this could be cards, this could be net banking, this could be UPI, this could be any other flavor like third party BNPL kind of providers like we would have seen with Simple, Lazy Pay, all of these, right? So basically, the payer could be a consumer like us, or it could be even a business. Like as I was saying, the example, if Amazon itself wants to use a B2B payment gateway, or companies basically are paying to AWS. AWS basically also is a payment gateway of it. So PGs, as called in India, you need to be, so a PG can be anyone. Even a bank can technically be a PG on its own, right? But typically most of the PGs we would have seen interacted in the market or seen firsthand are mostly tech companies who are not directly what we call as banks. They are what we tend to call from a regulatory perspective as payment aggregators. So these are payment aggregators are basically intermediaries who work with a bank basically in the backend to process transactions, or basically a payment aggregator itself can be a payment gateway, right? So it is basically kind of a license. So if you understand how banking license works, how a NBFC non-banking financial services licenses work, that is what a payment aggregator license as well. So a payment gateway can be itself working directly with a bank, or it might work with a payment aggregator, or it could be the same entity, right? Uh, in India, it's all regulated by RBI. The Reserve Bank of India is a central bank. And in some cases, as I was saying, where you're working with a bank in the back end, where you're piggybacking on their areas, etc., the bank has its own set of compliances and regulations. So who are these names you typically tend to hear a lot? You would have heard of the very famous Stripe, which is like one of the biggest players in the world. Adyen is another that you tend to hear in India, like one of the first pioneers in India. Builders was one of them. PayU, obviously one of the global ones. Razorpay, EaseBuzz, PhonePay, Decent. These are some of the PGs you tend to see. Who some of these are already payment aggregators as well, but these are names you'd have seen when you're paying through cards, when you're paying through UPI. Now, before we deep dive, so this is the start. So I hope if anybody has any questions, please feel free to post the question. So I want you all to actually just glance through this particular slide. So so assume you are basically a product manager, right, in a fintech company, or not really a core fintech, but let's say you are more on the ERP side. If you use Zoho in terms, to manage invoicing, manage transactions, manage the CRM, ERP, all of it. So think of it, you're somebody who's, going after early stage, not really early stage, but more on the growth stage, maybe like a pre-series A to seed stage funded startups to all the way to enterprises. So you are what they typically call as a SMB SaaS, not really B2B SaaS company in a strict way. Of course, you can sell to larger enterprises. So you're a PM who's basically looking at the payment space here, right? And you're working with third-party PGs. So like the names I was taking in the previous slide, you've actually integrated with them, and you're basically piggybacking on the rates. So now as a merchant or as a third-party platform, when you're using a PG, you obviously have to pay some money charges to the PG, because the PG itself, payment gateway itself has to pay charges downstream to its bank partner, etc. Or in the case of a card, basically, it all goes to the issue. So what is it that you're doing? You're the PM who's actually looking after the experience, or the PM who's is seeing how flows work, success rate, metrics. You built out checkout products. So if you've heard of some of, if you've seen some new age sites, for example, new age shopping platforms, for example, like Boat, like your Shiprocket, or for that matter, your Sleepy or Blue Talk, a lot of coffee platforms, D2C brands, Mama, they have custom checkout pages, etc., which is built by companies like GoSwift, Shiprocket, etc. So that's what your company is built, your entire econ, invoicing, everything that's required for a merchant to transact and manage. You are, as I said, looking at the payments and the new initiatives, right? And you're looking to launch a new product line. Just take this. So the team basically, the business teams basically do a lot of number crunching and see that there is a lot of, charges, fees going out. And you also as a PM see that there are challenges that you have with running in multiple integrations with third-party PGs, handling flows, settlements, reconciliations. So your company leadership walks up and, is like decides that, hey, look, let's try and build out an in-house product of our own. over the next 3 months. Uh, but obviously you know you're not very sure if 3 months is good enough, and the entire you do a basic amount of research, basic level of research. You're aware that the tech stack capabilities, the infrastructure that's required is very different from what your team already has plugged in or is live in the market. So the leadership team basically tells you, hey, let's say Gautam, why don't you go and come back to us with an approach note, a go to market, right, and come back to us with what your plans are. So you basically go to the market, start talking to people, etc., and you kind of come back. So, Harleen, do we do the breakout?
Yes, of course. I'll just do that.
Yeah. So what we kind of want to do is keep it more interactive. So anybody has any questions, feel free to ask me. Either on the chat or on the Q&A. I mean, I'm okay with either of it. So what we'll do is we'll split you into groups. Harleen will just brief you shortly. The thought process is we would want you to quickly take a couple of minutes and say, okay, what is it that maybe you'll cover? And obviously I'll go deeper into that in the subsequent slides. But yeah. Uh, so basically think of it like when you say go to market or how do you go launch up such a product, and you want to present it in terms of leadership, what is it that you'll cover or what something like that. So I'll just take a pause. I'll just let, from a logistics perspective, I'll just let Lynn set it up.
Hi, just give me a few minutes. I'm just facing some technical issues.
So there's a question as SaaS. People don't know about it. Okay, this is very new. So think of it like you are someone, as I was giving an example, right? So you are a company which wants to launch, you want to create, you just start off on your own, and you want to create email IDs, etc. Do for your employees, you start hiring, let's say, interns, full-time employees, right? So there are two ways you can go and do bunch of things like set up your own email server, etc., and worry about the hassles, etc. And you buy your own server, deploy email application, host everything. Or you just go to a Google or a Microsoft and say, hey, look, I will just pay you X rupees per month per user for whatever X GB, etc. And you'll get like bunch of collaborative tools like docs, sheets like Excel, Word doc, presentations, emails, obviously, etc. So when we say software as a service, structurally think of it like the company to whom you're paying, the SaaS company is managing everything. Where to host it, where not not to host it, what to do, think of everything in the backend. So you just job is just uh, to just use it and pay. A product, but you will actually be plugging in and trying to pitch to your merchant. So you are a ERP kind of a platform, like a Zoho, right? Or of Zendesk kind or similar CRM platform, or like a SAP mini versions, right? So you want to build a PG, right? So yeah, it's like a connector, like a Shopify, right? So one is you have a white label on Shopify or on your own platform. You've integrated with third party. Now you're launching it and you want merchants to actually use it. When I say use it, not just integrate, but there'll be some minor tweaks, etc. Right? So yes, it is in-house. When I say in-house, as in but it will still be a third-party product because your merchants have to use it or your customers, clients have to use it. I hope that answers your question. Goodness, yeah, goodness, and I hope that answers your question. Cool. I think there's some logistics issues. No worries. I think we'll just cool. So anybody wants to volunteer and chime in. So what is it that you would want to cover? I think we're not able to create a big room. So man, that's when it happens. So if let's say you are the PM and you were told to basically go out and tell, hey, like, no, Gautam, this is what I want to present. Does anybody have any thoughts? What is it that you would want to present, or what is it that you would want to present in front of your company's leadership, including product?
Gautam, sorry to interject. I'm facing some technical issues and hence not able to create breakout rooms. So if someone is, as you have asked someone to volunteer, if someone does want to do that, they can raise their hand on Zoom, and I can give them permission to unmute themselves. That's about it. Yeah.
Anybody wants to go? Right. So we have a very good answer, which is basically understand the current pain point. Customers basically cohorting or basically bucketing the customers and the value proposition, positioning. So marketing, I think very good points. So in fact, like very, very relevant points. Anybody else wants to chime in, add? Okay. So I want you to actually, again, yeah, so I think people are asking some very good questions. So examples of features not available. So yeah, providing what's a targeted audience, yeah, any compliance requirement to be followed. Exactly. So cool. I think directionally we are in the right direction. People have actually come back with some very good requirements, a thought process. So exactly, that is what we start thinking. So your broad objective is to launch, said you're integrated or you're using third-party services. Now, there will bound to be some pain points, etc., etc. So that is what you will start thinking. So you basically start thinking from a product perspective, sorry, from a different functional perspectives. So what is it that the customer wants? What is it that your business thing, what's your business outcomes that you're trying to achieve, what your goals you're trying to achieve? From an operations perspective, what is it that you have to solve for if you have to launch a product like a payment gateway? From a marketing or a go-to-market or a positioning, what's that's required? What is required from a compliance perspective? From a finance perspective, which is more to do with audits, etc. What is it that you are looking at to achieve, right? Any budgets that you have, which is more of a finance perspective, right? Or sometimes finance teams also have very clear basis. The budgeting, if it's a large company, and assume this is a fail-known company, as I had mentioned, finance will also have very clear budget saying, okay, hey, X crores or X lakh, Y lakh rupees is the budget. And lastly, your execution side, which is a design and engineering slash QA, where you need to worry about, hey, is it possible? What's the kind of timelines you're looking at, etc. So broadly, you start bucketing it into smaller components. When I say smaller components, you go into each. So I think rightly pointed out, from a business, you start asking those questions. Which is the segment I need to go after, right? Like current, even within the existing set of clients that you have, right? What's the kind of revenues that we're looking at, or what do you want to hope to achieve, right? Again, these are guiding questions or guiding numbers, not exactly last mile number saying we'll achieve exactly this, because a new product, a lot of things, will not really pan out as expected. Sometimes it can go well as well. From a compliance perspective, what does the guidelines come in? Like, what is RBI guidelines? What are the other guidelines people are following? If it is some specific use cases like an investment use case, etc. Is there any risks involved? Let's say, right? It could be any kind of risk. It could be operational risk. It could be somebody getting access to funds, mingling of funds, etc. From an operations perspective, it's about how will people get access to these payment the services. How will you make sure you have control over how they use it? How do you reconcile? So a major challenge in any kind of a fintech or any kind of payments product is how do you ensure every transaction is well reconciled or well settled. So whenever you try paying, you would have seen, right, as a card or a UPI, the transaction has to either fail or succeed. It can't be in a pending state, or it can't be in a ambiguous state for a very long time. Similarly, I was saying, what is how from your own perspective, from a financial perspective, do you work with a specific budget? Do you have a specific type of vendors, or do you have specific partners that you've already identified? Right? So, finance team or the procurement team in a lot of large companies have these constraints. From a product, as I think somebody mentioned rightly, like what is it that you want to solve in terms of scope, and how do you want to differentiate yourself? Because it's already merchants already there, your clients are already there, they're using your product there, but it's more like using third party, you're integrated, let's say, to pay you with a bill desk, etc. But you're actually trying to, not move them out, but build out your own product. So how will you be better for some of these merchants? Similarly, from a marketing perspective, how do you go about acquiring? When I say acquiring, it's not open market, but even with the existing merchants, how do you go around pitching this product? How do you showcase the benefits of this product? And more importantly, how do you position this product? Because it's not a product that you might want to just openly start marketing on day one. It might be a product that will go to that stage maybe a year, few years down the line. Uh, then basically, from a technology or a tech perspective, it's a build versus a buy call. So again, which is where your budgeting, all of it comes in, and it's a build, right? Are you going to sit and make sure build out every single components, or are you somebody who's like saying, okay, I'll just buy off the shelf or white label it or do something of that sort? You do get such capabilities even in this space. And more importantly, do you have the right bandwidth? And in the larger scheme of things, how much bandwidth is required? Not just product, but also your engineering, your QA, your design, etc. And from design itself, basically you got to think hard, saying, okay, how is it? What will I show in terms of content? How will I position it? Where will I show it? What is the kind of experience that I can give? Right. So there are products where your entire positioning, your entire content, your entire marketing is designed like in a way that has nothing to do with a fintech or a BFSI use case. So your marketing team needs to start thinking of it from scratch or from first principles as to how will you differentiate. I know this is a bit very complex and a lot of points, but this is how you start off with it. So then you're not obviously still talking to customers, or you've not gone live, but you know that, okay, at least what are my possibilities that I can do, which is a build versus a buy or etc. So you say that I have two options. One is, as I was saying, right? I can be, the company in this question can build the entire product from scratch. When I say entire product from scratch, I mean you do the card integration, you do the UPI integration, net banking integrations, etc. Or you basically piggyback on somebody who has most of it in place. Or you're trying to do just white label, do the APIs, integration, etc., designed experience. So and that's where you need to put on your thinking, your critical, thinking hat, and put on saying, okay, what are the pros and cons of each? Right? Again, we've not fully gone to the segment because a lot of it is also outcome of this. So when I look at the white label, this one, what are the positives? You can go to market a lot faster because your team has to just sit and integrate a bunch of APIs or SDKs provided by a partner. You don't have to heavy lift a lot. It's a lot of effort, less effort because most of it is battle tested, built by a bank, etc. Right? And you have very less cost. When I say cost, both your engineering, etc., your cost, direct costs, people costs are a lot lesser. On the other hand, at the same time, the challenge is it will come at a slightly higher cost because somebody else in the back end has spent all their bandwidth building a lot of this. And because it's a third-party tool, you don't have a lot of control on how it works, etc. Everything is exactly going to happen like the way you want it to, not really. Lastly, IP. So if you're building something different, something very differentiated, you're building something unique, etc., you will never be able to patent it, trademark it. So these are something large companies do tend to think. On the same time, folks, if anybody has any questions, feel free to put it in the chat or in the Q&A. Since I mean, happy to answer or bake that in. If any slide, please do that. Uh, So yeah, so what is the native or the direct integration? So your team has to do the integrations. You're doing each of it directly, right? Integrating on, let's say, Visa, a MasterCard, or a Amex, UPI directly with the banks of your choice, etc. What's the benefit? It gives you great performance because you can choose the right partner to work with, etc. You have a lot of control in terms of how responses are there, how are the experience given, where is the funds going, which error codes you're handling in the back end, etc. Long-term costs tend to be less. When I say long-term costs, because you're not giving away a large portion of your revenue to your partner, most of it is something you tend to keep. So you tend to keep, a larger margin for yourself, right? On the other hand, the challenge is just going to take a lot more time, right? It is very high cost initially building out everything on your own. And it's a lot more time consuming in terms of effort, in terms of manners that your engineering or product needs to do, because you need to go through an entire phase of everything, evaluate the right set of banks, do everything end to end. And to answer your question, yes, you can migrate. It's not that it's, in fact, that's how most of the PGs do basically. They start off working with some larger PGs, as bank PGs, etc. And then they basically slowly and steadily phase out and integrate directly with a particular bank or a card acquirer, etc., like a Visa, Master, Singer Bank. So that's just actual approach. And this is the high level. Again, this is not a roadmap in a strict way. This is a directional, right? So when you say presenting to leadership, you're presenting your thought process, right? So you say that you will go ahead with a white label integration. It's in the interest of time because you want to test out the waters, see what's happening. You're just going to focus on really, really important integrations. Nothing fancy like some exotic cross-border cards, corporate cards. Not really quite, right? You're looking at basic cards, basic what's absolutely required. You will roll out to the basic first set of merchants. So these are 3 months, 9 months, 12 months kind of roadmap. And you're okay with making sure you don't know. So whenever you're building a PG, you need to onboard merchants or clients. There is an offline process. Or when it's online, basically a lot of KYCs, documents are collected, etc. Uh, so when you say slower GTM versus faster GTM, so you can't go to markets if I am doing the integration with a bank for, let's say, each. So as a payment gateway, or if you're doing UPI as well, right? One is you can work with a partner or an aggregator, like I was covering in the first slide, right? Like a player, like a Decentro, where I work with currently, directly, right? Or you work with a bank directly. So working with a bank has its benefits, but it also has its challenges because your APIs, etc. Banks are not really core tech companies, right? They're more financial institutions. So you need to spend a lot of times in terms of testing, in terms of handling edge cases, handling error codes, scenarios, right? So effectively, what can be like a 2 to 3 weeks of in go live on, let's say, one small integration will end up taking you 2 to 3 months. So that is what I mean by slower versus faster go to market. Of course, this is assuming you're able to parallelize things. When I say parallelize, your marketing, your operations alignment, your compliance, business target, segmentation, all of it is covered. I hope that answers the questions in terms of slow versus faster go to market. Right. Uh, so yeah, so I was just saying, so basically you need to collect documents. You will assume that I'll do everything offline, do everything which is very, very basic what's required. Then you basically look at something a lot more nuanced where I'll move to some of my own direct integrations with a Visa, with a Master, with a Amex, etc. You basically then, yeah, this is a good question, Mridula. I'll cover this. So you basically start looking at, okay, how will which is the right partner to work with is a medium term I'm talking, and basically roll out not just like alpha or a beta, but a slightly larger set of merchants. And then obviously in parallel you'll also make sure from your learnings improve on the performance and metrics. What is a real long term if it takes off? You are basically looking at like a full blown integrations, uh, in terms of saying, okay, how do I really, really go live, let's say directly in terms of a bank, directly integrate with a Visa, directly integrate with a MasterCard, right? Nothing through a bank as such. You want to build a lot of control saying, okay, I won't allow somebody to transact on this platform, kind of merchant, this kind of controls. You'll give a lot of these to merchants. You can even go out if things go well and market it as a standalone competitor to your other payment gateways in the product. And post that, you basically can invest more funds. Uh, the question is there any audit process very regulatory like RBI? Yes, there is no direct, as a PG, no, RBI doesn't really do a direct audit of a PG. It usually happens on the bank, and the bank tends to do an audit on the PG. And if there is anything open or anything, the bank basically then, uh, basically takes a call to continue, not continue, etc. Right. So there is no audit in a strict way, but yes, if you're a regulated entity like a payment aggregator, yes, RBI does indeed ask for a lot of things. It's a known thing. To answer your question, replacement product from scratch, we're not really building from scratch, as I was kind of trying to cover. Uh, that is where we'll cover in the subsequent slides. So before I go deeper, I want to basically people to also think, right? So your SaaS space itself is a pretty hard and different space from B2C. In B2C, you have a lot of consumer data. We ourselves tend to be the users of that product. You can empathize with a lot of things. In B2B, that's not really the use case. Right? While you as a user might still use something on a G Suite or Microsoft 365 or your Slack or your Teams or any kind of product, it's a very different ballgame. You'll have different type of personas, and that is why B2B SaaS is a beast in itself. It's a different set of challenge. Data alone is not going to be sufficient to take on. Now within that, if you're looking at a fintech, you basically have two core areas you need to be always worried about. One, in terms of externally, what is it that in terms of compliances, what is, as I think people have asked, right? So what are the regulatory requirements, compliances you need to keep in mind when you're building? So you need to be very aware of it. What are the protocols? When I say protocols, in terms of tech, in terms of how you're, security wise, etc., in terms of how you're communicating, policies, etc., all of these become very important points. So if you see most payment provider companies, which basically are in the payment space, always have things like grievance policies, terms and conditions, privacy policy, a lot of these things, which is mandated by bank partners. Lastly, processes. So like it or not, because you're working with third-party customers, banks, sometimes even like card acquirers are saying like Visa, MasterCard as well. There are very set processes and protocols that you need to follow. And some of it requires handling crores and crores of worth of funds as well. That is while one side, the other side is also understanding what are the internal levers here, right? So you need to be very clear, okay, from a business perspective, for whom am I building? What is going to be, is there a business impact, a tangible business impact? From a technology perspective, what is the kind of stack that's required? How competent is your team? Or how good is your current stack, right? And largely experience. While it's one thing to be really build a SaaS product, building a fintech or a payments within a non-fintech company is a different ballgame altogether. And it can all get confusing, right? Because it's one thing to build an invoicing platform, but when you are the one who's processing, you're the one who's taking all of these calls, whom to onboard, not onboard. You need the right set of people in terms of experiences who understand these circulars, who understand commercials, who understand how compliances work. And that is why it's so challenging and both interesting to be a PM in the fintech or the BFSI space, right? I'll cover this. I think the question on the migration, etc., will come in the next step. So now you basically have high level thought through, and you've not spoken to everybody because still you are at the stage where you're still conceptualizing. You want to at least present it to the leadership and then get a buy-in before you start doing the next level of research. So you get a sense, you've spoken to high level, your business team, operations team, or a high level. Uh, so you go about the V1 scope, as I was saying, which is the 3 months roadmap, basic one. You know that it's not going to be like a crazy adoption, right? And a lot of things need to be detailed out, handling funds flow, etc. Right? But the team is in a hurry, right? The team leadership wants, they have some milestones, some external commitments that they wanted to launch a product. So want to launch something very quick, I wouldn't say dirty, but just launch a product, get a sense of the market. You basically just say, cool, I will do this. The leadership team is ready to take a call. So you basically ask for a month more extra because you need some time to research, and you basically just say, cool, I'll just launch a white label product, which I was saying. basic whatever is provided, like your cards, UPI, etc. Nothing else that's required. So this is the point. You will be like, this is what I want. Again, now why am I not going through it full blown? I'll cover that as well. So just bear with me. But just want to get a sense, what do you think happened after this? So you launch, you get a sense, your business team has told you what to do, what are the high level kind of merchants. You are also aware because you've already spoken to your other peers in the product team within the org, etc. You launch the product. What do you think happens now after this? Or what do you think happened? Anybody can go. Right, you can give your feedback points in the chat as well if anybody has, like, what do you think could have happened after this? Yeah, low adoption. Yes, it's a good point. If anybody else wants to go, like, what do you think could have happened? Low adoption is one. Do you foresee any other challenges, anything else happening? Yeah, failures, definitely. Poor product performance. Not really. I would say MVP. This is not really an MVP. No, I wouldn't say it's really an MVP. It's more like a V1. A V1 might be an MVP. MVP need not necessarily be a V1. So in this case, assume it's not exactly a very basic MVP. It would be MVP with a bit more, more features, etc. Because as I think covered by one of the folks here, I think Mridula was the one who raised, right? You are also trying to build something which will be at least in a position that you can adopt, get customers to use it at least. Whether it works or not is secondary, but you want at least people to give you that feedback. Customer success affected, team knowledge is not well, not really. I don't think that's something that not really. So V1 can be post MVP. So it depends. So there is no such thing as there's no standard jargon, to be honest, in product. So your MVP can be pre V1, it could be V 0.1, or it could be V 2 as well. So it depends on how you call it. So if it helps you people visualize, you can call everyone as an MVP. Retrospection, yeah, definitely. That's a very good point. Retrospection. Uh, cool. I mean, I can understand the product. The scenario is a bit complex. Adoption happens in a way. Yes, it did happen. Feedback. Yeah. So good points. You need analytics. You need to understand feedback from this help exactly. And version is out, scaling. So I'm not even thinking of scale, but all very good points. Your product actually got adopted, as I think rightly said. It was used. It was not like it didn't, like it completely got junked. But you end up realizing that most of the transactions was happening on UPI. People were not really using cards, which is both credit or debit card, right? And you see that it's 90% of the transactions are happening through UPI. And everybody knows you don't really make a lot of money on UPI alone, right? Now, I mean, revenue-wise, margins is still okay. It's not much different. But from a revenue perspective, you don't make much money on UPI because you can't really charge as much. So you knew something was off, right? So you had some hunts, you were a bit, concerned, but you buckled under pressure. And this is the real world scenario, not mine, but something I'm aware of, a company which actually did it. So you didn't really share those concerns. You just with leadership because you're like, hey, the leadership team wants it, so I'm going to build it. And yes, it's a real world problem. A lot of the time, leadership does indeed ask for commitments and go live and are ready to take that failure as well. Good teams do, it's a collective failure. And along with it, a new element comes in. You realize that the way it was built And a lot of compliances, I think somebody's covered it as well, not from a compliance. Some important use cases like transaction actually happening in a compliant way was ignored, right? Your operations team, because it's still a lot, it's still a V1 or MVP as most of you are asking, right? A lot of it was offline. You had not automated, right? 3 months is not sufficient to integrate, automate, do everything. You launched in 3 to 4 months, right? Unless you have like 20, 30 devs and a lot of product managers to do a lot of things, it's practically very, very challenging. So a lot of it was left offline, right? As I was saying. And you realize people actually gamed it. I wouldn't say gamed it, but it was basically a miss. So massive, massive compliance, no misses. So as I covered, right? So as something was not right, right? I knew from beginning that this something of this sort is bound to happen. And that is what typically we call in product as product sense, right? So what basically just happened was you jumped, or a lot of the times product managers just jump into what the business team, and it's a very common problem on the B2B SaaS side of things. The PMs basically just jump into executing, rolling out a product, and then figuring out whom to build for, what to build. And that is where I think somebody rightly pointed out. First, understand what's the pain points, right? What is their needs? What is it that they want? And when I say without noise, a lot of the time the feedback that you get is not unfiltered, right? It comes in after a lot of internal, external biases creeping in is when it comes to the product teams. And this is very true in B2B because you basically have to go through the customer success team or your account managers, depending on how companies are structured, or your business development, sales folks. And which is why it's very, very challenging in a B2B SaaS setup as a PM to get that unfiltered insights. And that is what was one of that instinct, right? You knew that you couldn't spend a lot of the time understanding the pain points. You are busy implementing and not busy thinking or talking to people, which is the first order, as I'd like to call, right? Your empathy, you talking to people. The second is basically what I keep telling everyone. What are the influences? What are the indirect user problems, indirect problem statements? There are challenges. For example, you will never hear directly people say, "Hey, I'm understaffed." Your operations user who's actually using your product to reconcile will say, "Hey, I'm the only person sitting and doing this, Gautam." Right? They'll never say. They'll indirectly say that I want more automation. I want the simple, right? Which is the second order. How do I reduce the effort for my users from the customer side? Then is what is typically your next level, which is how do you go deep into some one or two specific pain point some of these users, which is what I think somebody called it, right? Like mentioned in the chat that that's the route you should be taking. And exactly why I've taken a reverse route of not going to positive is the positive scenario is what you typically don't always encounter in the market. It's all documented very well and nice everywhere, but the reality is many times you are on tight timelines, you are on bandwidth is crunched, you have to ship out, you have to get that feedback fast. And that's why I took a route of going through this route. So now that I think somebody mentioned you have metrics, you have everything, right? So good point. What happens if we discover the generic company? So if you're referring that competitors are already solving, and is it that this company, you know, uh, has a differentiation as a PM, that is your KRA, you have to think, okay, how will I differentiate myself from my competitors? In some scenarios, in a lot of the scenarios, you might not have a very strong differentiation initially, right? So it's all a lot of the times it could just be even a commercial differentiation. It could be just be able to launch a product with better support. It could be a product which has faster resolution time. It could be a product where you're able to uh, basically just able to give better commercials to your merchants. Could be so differentiation is what a very, very, very core thing comes in from a product. So most people tend to think that differentiation from a product, especially in a B2B SaaS, is always going to be some extra feature. Not really. Sometimes it's all about the right set of features working much better. So I'll come to that very classic use case in product we tend to track everywhere is success rates, right? Your competitor is also giving, but a lot of the times, if it is not a lot of high effort, competitors will switch to you, even if you are able to give the same kind of or even better support with equally good or better success rates, right? And a lot of the time, all they would ask is some better reporting, slightly better insights, better analytics. That's it. So you will realize that as a PM in a B2B SaaS setup, it's not always about just saying, oh, cool, I'm going to have a very different kind of capability. Not real, right? I'll cover it actually, how the user research bit comes in, but that's it. So many times you might, from a core product, differentiation might actually be quite low, right? But it all comes together as a package, because for a customer, it's not just your product. And that's the difference between a B2B and a B2C product, right? Like the way we're using Zoom or etc. Right? It's not about how good the audio quality on Zoom is alone, right? It's also about, I worry about, okay, how many attendees can attend here? How comfortably are they able to launch a product? How good is the pricing? Can they understand a freemium model well, etc. A lot of and as that is what you have to uncover, right? I hope that answers this question. Uh, s- so yeah, please keep it coming. So now coming to the next point, right? I was saying, so now that is where, now that you've realized that, hey, look, I have to be talking to customers. So you go back to talking to people who actually use the product, right? So people who said, cool, I'll give it a shot. That's fine. So you speak to some of these clients or merchants, as we call it in the payments jargon, right? They say the product is actually quite good. There's no major issue with the product, right? You're happy, right? Yes, UPI is the one that's taking off compared to cards, but it is an embedded product. It's working well. It's not that it's a bad or a shortly done product. So you look into the metrics, and as I was saying, right, UPI is clearly win-win for now. That is now where you want to ideally, go to market with, double down on UPI, but things aren't so simple, right? So you reach out to more merchants, right? So is that the way it works, right? Do they actually want to just continue transacting in UPI, right? Or are they looking to also use cards, but they're not using it for some reasons? So a lot of the merchants, and somebody I think asked very well, is a lot of the merchants or the clients say that the reason they want to use a product is because they want lower commercial than what the market is offering or the competitors are offering in the market, right? And your for then question is why, right? They're still doing quite well. So they are, when they say product features, they are saying that, hey, look, I'm whatever is happening, right? I'm paying a particular commercial. I'm not really that impressed for what I'm paying. I'm happy with what I'm happy, at least on the card side. UPI people are using because, as I said, commercials tend to be on the lower side and you're able to match it. What do you think? And you see that, yes, month on month, the numbers are only growing. UPI, right, is ramping up a lot better. Absolute numbers. So looking at this trends, etc., what would you want to do next? I'll just again, it's more of what would you do next? Yeah, good question. Do you want to go back to the drawing board and see whether you want to even continue with this product, or you sunset the product? Yeah, or you want to change pricing? That's another very good way of looking at it. But yeah, I just a hint. You need to incentivize users commercially, or when you are basically getting people to switch to your product, right? Because it's a replacement product. It's not like, unless these are very new merchants in the market who've not been acquired by others or have not been serviced well, etc. These are merchants who actually have already are using a builders or a razor pay or a payu in the market, right? Or a easebus. They don't really need you as such, right? Pivot based on your inputs. Yes. Abandon the new product. Yes, exactly. So before you take calls, right, as a product manager, you need to align people internally. So you want to know what is actually happening. So if you look at in a SaaS setup, right, so you only get to know, okay, how many people, let's say, signed up, how many people are there in your system transacting, etc. So the metrics I was showing you here only tell you one side of the story. They don't tell you a lot of the things which are outside your system, right? Because as I said, this is a basic product that's gone out. You want to know what is it that your business and operation teams have to say. One of the things they come back to is that the MDR, which is the commercials, you basically are basically you want to charge the merchants or clients. The business team is not even pitching. They're like, hey, it doesn't make sense. The commercials are too expensive, etc. And to top it up, your operations team is also a bit clogged because they're not able to onboard fast. They're taking a lot of the time, basically, vis-a-vis competitors who are able to do it in a day, max, maybe 1.5 days at the most, right? Or maybe even in a few hours in some cases. Uh, if you look at it, that is a logical next step is naturally your adoption, whatever is happening, but at scale or going ahead, clearly there is disconnect. Right? You've gone ahead with white labeling with a specific product, but your business team is not pitching the card. It's not user journey. As I said, yes, user journey in the way that in PGs, when you onboard a merchant, you decide to take it offline. When I say offline, everything is sent to the bank partner for creating credentials, etc. offline, because you don't have the bandwidth to invest in those backend capabilities. And even now, even PGs at scale right now also do it offline only, by the way, on the card side, because there are no APIs where you can just hit it and do it. There, it's still offline right now in the payment space and on the merchant. So when you see a Zomato's handle, you're paying through, to Zomato or Amazon, that MID or the ID that the Amazon team gets is not something that's generated in a few minutes. It takes hours together because it has to go through a bunch of approvals. And that's for big merchants. For smaller merchants, it can take even more time. So most of the teams don't really optimize for that part of the journey. They have more focus on the performance of the product. They're more focused on making sure basic documents, whatever is covered, captured is optimized, right? So that is where the disconnect is exactly. So operations is not doing a great job in onboarding or onboarding faster. And to top it off, the business team is not even pitching cards, aggressively, right? So naturally, your adoption on cards is going to take a hit because your overall as a org, you've not agreed on a one common platter saying this is what I'm going to go to market, this is what I'm going to pitch. Right? This is what the negative scenario was telling. So, so a lot of your merchants is a pushback saying that remove my flow on the product. It's okay. Go take me to my old PG. Or they tell you that make the tweaks to the product, improve the journey, basically give me credentials faster, give me better commercials. No, that's what people are asking for, right? So basically it's a backlash. Yeah. So I mean, yeah, you have to, that's what, so you have to beat commercials, etc. Right? So uh, that's where you basically have to go to you talk to people. So what does the business team want? They say, hey, I should be able to offer lower commercials to customers. And I want better experience in terms of not just onboarding, but overall metrics, etc. While adoption is coming and it's still not maybe as much as they want, because again, you're competing against some industry leaders. They're like, I want at least a product which is at par. Your compliance team is already flagged off that there are some problems and concerns in the way things are, and a lot of things are offline. Your operation team is already again telling a lot, everything is manual, everything is operationally done by human intervention. There is no such thing as automation, etc. And they have very limited bandwidth and they're not. Marketing, on the other hand, is concerned that, hey, like we're not clear what you want us to talk about in the market. And this is impacting the main product, which is the ERP, the CRM, those products are getting impacted because your core, this is your new vertical, right? So you have marketed existing, etc. People will start ditching you or people will start giving negative feedback about it, right? Which is what marketing is. And as a PM, you need to understand and you can't take it with a pinch of salt, but that's where you have to talk to end users. So you go take contacts from your team or through your business team or through your CS team, you set up calls, right? with your stakeholders. When I say stakeholders, on the client side. So what do they have to say? Because the real feedback comes when you talk to these people, not what your internal users alone say. And the external users, the business users have concerns saying, I don't want to be paying money for a bad experience. Move me out. They're basically taking the better products in the market. No, just phase out your product or make it better. Your product PMs on the client side are like, hey, the metrics, the product metrics, the success rates, the tags don't measure up. You need to buckle up. But they do give a good feedback that yes, it's very well embedded and integrated in the main ecosystem. We are happy. It's that way we are not fully unhappy. Your operations users, the people who actually spend most of the time on the product beyond the basic integration with the product team does, or the business team has signed commercials, etc., is that your reconciliation, everything is very time consuming, right? So your operations on the client side, operations users spending a lot of the time, more time than before with other payment gateways. Your finance team is basically on the other side, basically your finance or accounting team is basically complaining, I'm not clear which part of his TDS, where is GST, how is the invoicing happening, what's happening. Again, because you rolled out a quick product, again, these are a lot of problems that you end up facing, right? Of course, you can take because this is a time crunch. So what should have been done or what should you be doing here, right? To get those real actionable insights. While empathy is very important, everything is you should be doing three core things, as I call it. Observing. So spending time talking to people, seeing how do they actually use your product, right? Of course, and in consumers, you have first-hand experience. How do you order a food? How you book a cab? How you shop online? How you interact with the social media? B2B, you got to be talking to people, asking, okay, what part of the reports that we're giving, what part of the APIs you're not clear or SDK is not clear. Talk to the actual users, right? You'll realize the person who's signing off on the commercials that you have to give is not always necessarily the decision maker. Right? They are the decision maker, but they're not somebody who is going to be using your product day in, day out. A classic example in B2B is the person who's signing off on commercials is not somebody who sits day in, day out interacting with your stack. It's usually the PMs, usually some cases engineers, or in some cases are in operations people. Another good way to get a lot of insights a lot faster is getting a sense of support tickets. So it could be your support email IDs, people who are basically talking to customer support teams on call. Even getting on a call with the customer support team itself is a massive, feedback loop. I think a lot of you have already covered in the chat. Another major point which should be done, especially when the product early stage, is building a feedback loop. So basically just asking people, okay, just raise a ticket, you monitoring it, okay, is it recurring problems? Right? Giving out very clear FAQs, etc., very clearly saying, okay, this is what you can, the problem is, this is how we can help you. The last is basically now you observing, what people, do, how do they use your product, what is the kind of support, what are the challenges you feel, how do you actually monitor it at scale or otherwise, which is where your product metrics come into place. It could be even business metrics for that matter. So you need to constantly keep doing CSAT or NPS kind of calls through your customer success team, right? A lot of it is qualitative feedback. Like I was telling, people will never tell you from product metrics, you will never get to know that somebody is complaining of a lot of recon time at their end. You only get to know that when you talk to people, right? Nobody will tell you that, hey, I'm not able to understand this particular parameter, or this is what's happening. Why are you, sending me a redirection or a callback like this, right? All of that you actually get to know when you read a ticket or when you get on a call. So metrics tell you one side of the story. Other side is really not metrics alone. It's also a lot of qualitative conversations. Now, while all of that is happening, you know that there is something also, the compliance team has asked you, right? That, hey, things aren't good. So RBI, as part of any payments or BFSI product, typically regulators tell you, okay, how is it that the funds that are getting collected needs to be settled? You can't randomly settle random amount of funds, hold funds indefinitely, settle it to anybody and everybody. So your bank partner, like who's processing or helping you process the transaction, is aware that there is a lot of, that there is some negligence from your end. Your team is not doing things the way they should be meant to do. But they're aware that you're a large company that is giving them large business, etc. And so they just quit for some time. And they've ignored for a while, right? But nobody's going to be indefinitely be okay with it. However, your business team wants this flexibility, a bit of relaxed compliance, because that's how they're also able to go out and market it, saying, okay, cool, we'll relax onboarding process. You have to give me less documents. You have to give me, no, I'll somehow get you onboarded. I'll settle funds wherever you want, etc. Right? Your operations team has concerns saying, cool, we're not fully compliant. You need to make it more robust because it's not foolproof. As I said, right? You built an MP1, basically, you're still building on top of it. Your compliance team wants you to automate, saying, okay, I'm taking a director's KYC, a company's KYC. I want, they're like, I don't want just the ops team, but the system also should be able to tell us and spit out our results, saying, is it, you know, accurate, not accurate? Is it an actual document, fraudulent document, scam, etc. I'll just take up, yeah. So good question. So what do you monitor in a payment gateway? Um, Typically you tend to monitor from the time of somebody approving, or rather approving at a product level, your success rates, your TATs, within your success rate, failures, basically, what are the different reasons for failure? In UPI, in cards, net banking, could be anything. Let's say in UPIs, it could be somebody entering invalid PIN, somebody entering, basically having insufficient funds, or their bank is down, etc. Right? On the card side, it could be where there's an issue with the card itself, there's some invalid CVV involved, they're entering invalid OTP, for example. People are entering invalid card itself many times, or they're entering a card which could be wrong. When I say wrong, I mean like Gautam's card details is basically being entered by somebody else, or vice versa. So that is what you kind of want to be monitoring, right? It's a constant thing. One time, or when initially you want to be onboarding, how fast is a customer going live, right? What's your time to go live? The first transaction, right, at scale, not like a one-on testing transaction people stop it, which is what a lot of the customers tend to do. They want you to go like they just do a few test transactions, and then they'll basically just be like, I'll go live later. A lot of the PMs tend to take the test transactions as go live and be happy, but really that's not the case. Uh, yeah, so I hope that answers your question. So typically that's, and obviously the other metrics like GMV, transaction size, per transactions, etc. You tend to monitor all of it, which is, you also monitor for anomalies. You also monitor for, some discrepancies. For example, somebody says there's always average, let's say a credit card spend is happening, not at a user level, overall. Let's say it's happening in, let's say, average of 1,000, but suddenly things start going to 2,000, 3,000. You want to know why that's happening as well, right? So that's what. So I hope if I'll just take a pause. I mean, last, I think 5-10 minutes has been quite dense. If anybody has any specific questions, I'll be happy to answer. Has this been helpful, clear? Any feedback? Anybody wants to give any feedback? I mean, yeah, I know I have to condense a lot, unfortunately, because of time crunch, but yes. Okay, I'll take that as a no, and hopefully a positive one. So yeah, so this is the slide. You want to do all of this. So as I said, you're a lot of people, you've gotten bunch of actionable insights from your end users or client side. You've gotten feedback points from your own internal users across different functions. And you're aware there is some compliance and some operational problem processes, changes that's required. What would you do next? I'll just take a minute if people can, if anybody wants to chime in and answer. Right, you're at a stage where you want to plan out your next step, because you're aware that the product has gone out. It's not that there is zero adoption. People are complaining, granting, and it's bound to happen, right? No product goes to market and will be always perfect. But yeah, just want to get a sense, how do you handle this? So you have a compliance challenge, you have a bunch of things. What will you do next? Any thoughts anybody has? Yep, you prioritize. Yes, right. So exactly. So you prioritize. You can't possibly take everything and everything together. You have to break it down into smaller components. So again, because it's not, you realize it's like a massive disconnect, or there is different people are talking different things. You want to make sure that people are fully aligned. Uh, so you have to take this on, a war footing, right? You want to take this forward. So you basically understand, you present to your leadership things, from a compliance isn't, or isn't as clean as it should be. And they tell you, cool, you come back with the right approach, the right processes. So you ask for 2 weeks to document, like I'll come back, I'll read more of the guidelines, talk to the bank partners, talk to some of your other peers in the market, get a sense of what's happening. And as I said, you also get a sense, you want to talk to your operations team, compliance team, what's happening, etc. Right? As I've been kind of covered. And you basically set up a meeting with the leadership to understand why did they do what they do. So like, why is the process gaps existing? Why is the business team doing what it's doing? So a very important element as a PM is to understand what are your stakeholders and partners actually thinking of when they're doing it. So why is the business team not pitching, right? So why are they saying, okay, flex onboard any merchant, settle anywhere, or flexible? Why? Simply because it's helping them crack some deals, basically give flexibility to your customers, which maybe some of your other competitors are not ready to, or not ready to take that chance, at least with those set of merchants. So that's how they actually ended up acquiring those merchants. I am not saying that's the way it works always, but that's something common. So they had targets, right? As any or B2B or any kind of company, you tend to have targets. Salespeople tend to have targets. You have quotas you need to meet, right? So how many customers you've added, how many agreements you've signed. So they tend to take shortcuts. Your compliance team has concerns, right? Your partner can shut you down, or tell you reduce the number of transactions or reduce these kind of non-compliant things that you're doing. And what can go to the roof is basically a regulator coming to saying, hey, you're doing something which is not right, right? Your operation team is not able to despite the bandwidth, etc., they're not able to do a good job of checking doing a good due diligence, doing all the checks and balances, because the business team is pushing for faster onboarding. And as I said, they are crunched. They're aware that there are some things which are breaking, but they've ignored it, because again, they have some tats, they have some metrics that have been given that you need to onboard a merchant within a number of hours, etc. And these are common in most processor companies. Then you basically, from a risk perspective, which is job is to think, right? The risk team highlights, hey, money can go into any, this can be fraudulent transactions. That's not getting flagged. This can impact the biggest thing, which is your main products, branding. While people might not churn out, they might start giving negative feedback in the market. And this can in turn impact. So now that you've spoken, you get a detailed sense. What are the gaps? And why are people actually exploiting that gaps as well? Right? So you get a sense. So the business team was trying to pitch this as a cheaper or a less expensive alternative to what's there in the market. Because they honestly don't really care about engineering, tech, everything. For them, it's a matter of saying, how will I get a deal out of the way? So, and it works at a very high scale, even a 0.1 percentage or even a five basis points will make or break a deal. They were convinced basically that making things flexible, settling anywhere, allowing onboarding kind of risky use cases, risky funds, etc., also will get them through. Since beyond a point of cost effectiveness won't work, right? The people who will really pay them the kind of commercials, etc., would be slightly risky use cases or where people are ready to pay for some flexibilities. And your operations team, as I was saying, right, they had less automation. They ignored some of the checks and balances which they're supposed to do, and in some cases, just knowingly also like ignored it. In some cases, unintentionally also slipped to the compliance teams and risk teams flagged, but again, as I said, people, it's all in the sailing in the same boat types, right? And there's a common problems. So you basically now have all the different problems. So you go about looking at the target segment, saying, so whatever you've done till now is not the right approach, right? What you've done till now is more of a reactive. I launched the product. Now let me figure out whom to, pitch this or how to pitch this. Rather, it's the other way around. You got to talk to people, understand what their wants and needs. What is it that their problem statement is? Somebody might say, I don't care about UI or tech or anything. All I want is good success rates. Somebody might say, all I care is fast settlements in the account I've given. I don't care about anything else, right? I'm okay to live with maybe 7, 8 days in terms of onboarding, but I just want it out of the way. Somebody might say, hey, I'll never switch to you unless you give me better rates, right? You'll have all kinds of spectrum of, customers. Somebody might say, hey, I'm not going to pay beyond a point for you. Pay. It's free. You guys get it for free or you get it with very low rates. You're pricing it up at a very high rate. So another conversion merchant says, like, I want a very flexible flow, which is non-compliant technically, right? So you have different, this is the user research stage. You get different variations, right? You get different scenarios. Now, this is where you have to now document the problem statements, right? What are those core problems that I need to solve for, right? So before jumping on it, like the first, and that's the product discovery phase or the user research phase, product research phase that you look at, right? What if you see there was no clearly defined problem statements, right? So the product was launched and then mostly it was firefighting. And that's common. It happens everywhere. The MVP, you launch it with a certain set of problem statements. They either get invalidated, right? Or basically they get validated to some extent, and which is fine. But it's not something that you can scale it up, right? It's good for a V1, it's good for initial. So clearly define the problems statements you want to solve for scale as initial. You can't put out all the fires. No, build hypothesis. When I say hypothesis, I don't really mean like a statistically significant hypothesis, but be very clear. Okay, if I am going to build a more compliant product, but this will also, have with the right set of things, but this will also require us to maybe, and when you say validate, build very clear use cases saying, okay, this can also result in a 10 or maybe a 5% reduction in our GMV or number of transacting clients. And it's fine. Whether that happens is secondary, but you need to have the data. Similarly, in terms of success rate, build hypothesis saying some early stage startups, smaller merchants who are more price conscious, you can always tell them that we'll not give you any kind of priority support, or will not give you any kind of quick onboarding, but we'll give you very, very competitive commercials, and they're okay to live with even, as I said, 7 or 10 working days to get the credentials. So that is where you need to start thinking deeper, right? And then you start prioritizing, okay, which problems do I solve? You can't solve all the problems, right? And as said, I think somebody mentioned in the chat also, right? You have to iterate. So you built a V1 product, you realize basically certain features are working well. The other features are not adopted well or not working as well, primarily because there was a misalignment, etc. Which is what you're now trying to solve for in the second iteration or a V2. But how do you know whether you're solving, which is the last phase, which is, so you identify the problem, you figured out ways to solve it, but how do you know whether you've solved it, which is the metrics. So you need to define how to identify whether you've successfully solved a problem or you've not solved a problem at all. And obviously, most of the times, your product metrics or even your business metrics is somewhere. Similarly, your continuous measurement and feedback. When I say measurement and feedback, it shouldn't be like you look at metrics once in a while, you look at feedback once in a while and just leave it up. In SaaS, it's a very critical thing to make, especially at your pre-scale stage. You have to make sure you're constantly in touch with your on-ground teams. Even if it's a new product in a large company, right? You're constantly aware what's happening at a ground level. This is what we call as product discovery. So, in a nutshell, it all boils down to whom am I going after, which is your segment. How will I give value to them? Now, this value could be commercials in terms of saving cost for them, saving time for them, improving success rate, which could be including GMV, including conversions for them, and which basically leads you to your marketing positioning as well. Are you whom should marketing be reaching out to, right? For whom are you basically trying to solve a problem for? You can't solve for all the segments, right? I'll just take a pause if anybody has any questions. Okay. No questions? Okay. Even of internet. There is no one. So, Dina, there's no one standard question. I mean, answer. Sorry. I can tell you that. Okay, there's a descending order. It all depends on, what is your target segment, at which stage, when you're launching, basically, what's the kind of market, how mature is that market, or how mature are your customers, etc. Uh, so typically, as I said, if you are primarily in the B2B space, you would want to do what is typically called as table stakes, which is making sure uh, yeah, the product discovery is basically is ideally asked before dev, but many times it's a constant, Akila. You can't just ask before dev and leave it. It's a constant question to keep on asking because your business team keeps onboarding new set of use cases. So it's a constant thing. So whenever you're launching, even you, like, because you need to be in touch, as I was saying, right? It's constant. So I mean, sorry, coming back to Dina's point, your point. So it's mostly going to be making sure you're compliant, making sure your very, very critical risks are addressed, making sure what is really your base metrics or your hygiene metrics like your success rate, tats, all of that people need to be having in place. So you can't be building a SaaS product and say, hey, like my uptime is going to be 60-70%. Nobody's going to buy your product if that's the uptime, right? Nobody's going to buy your product if your success rates on, let's say, on cards is let's say 70% or 73%. People will be like, I don't want this product, right? It's worse than doing nothing, right? Similarly, you can't be sending or intimating a merchant 10, 30, 40 seconds after you get a confirmation from your partner that a transaction has happened, right? So those are what I would call as descending order. So your core compliance or core rails, a core platform in terms of engineering, etc., stability, uptime, all of it, and then your performance metrics. Then comes all your fancy items, onboarding, optimizing, all of that. Yeah, any other questions, anybody? Yeah. So product discovery, yes. Product discovery is both iterative as well as product discovery is pre-launch, or even sometimes, as I was saying, like in this case, a lot of the times you have a set of hypothesis or certain set of things that you launch with, but you realize, hey, like after the launch, it's not, you know, uh, the right set. Or, this customers didn't, you realize somebody else ended up using it. So there have been scenarios where we thought fintechs will use our product, but we ended up realizing more than fintechs, basically, marketplaces like the product. Uh, no legacy companies ended up liking a certain type of product. So yeah, how to decide major product success KPIs are basically depends basically your, as I was saying, your GMV in case of payments, or number of clients you're onboarding, number of transactions you're doing, success rates, TATs basically, which is a core product metrics. Basically, like again, onboarding not really depends. If that's something that is what expectation and that's your core user proportion, then yes. how fast, etc. Otherwise, most of it is going to be your in a SaaS setup is always going to be how less queries you are, how fast can a merchant go live on your platform. Those are what I would say are your product KPIs. Apart from that, everything else is like end of the day, you're always in a SaaS setup trying to do only two things. You're just literally two things. Either you are, I mean, from a either reducing costs or you're trying to increase revenue for your customers. So compliance also basically goes under both. By being compliant, you don't have to worry about your revenue or business, or it will help you reduce costs because tomorrow any regulator, anybody comes you finds you, you are losing lakhs or maybe lakhs of rupees. So in the end, in a B2B SaaS, you are enabling only two outcomes: reduction in costs, which is directly reducing costs or through people, or you're basically helping go live faster, which is an impact on business. I hope that's what. Cool. I'll cover the as we go. So basically, as I was saying, as I covered here, uh, right? So your product discovery is all about building those segments. Again, now this is iterative. Your segments might, new segments evolve. Your newer set of problem statements come up. So as I was saying, you might start off with very small merchants, startups, etc. for a different set of their problem statements and why it's a problem for them, right? And as you start catering to larger customers, larger merchants, etc., you will start facing different problems. So, or it could be even attributes. So initially you might start, target somebody who's very tech savvy, right? Happy with everything. And then you eventually go to somebody who is like, not so tech savvy. Their problem statements or your challenges your team faces would be very different. So it's a very iterative and more importantly, something that is not homogeneous. Unless you are like this is only this one side product. This is just one product. I'll only cater to this customer. Then, which is typically very rare in B2B SaaS products. Typically, the same product has different flavors, different layers, how it's sold, how it's in terms of support, etc. varies. A very good example is Zoom. Very good example is uh, Microsoft products or even Google products, etc. Right. So the Google doesn't give you any kind of on-call support for your G Suite, regular G Suite and all. But when you are an enterprise customer, special customer, you do get priority support, all of that, right? So that's the way to also look at it. So just a continuation, defining clear problem statements, right? So as I said, your startups or your specific industries, will have different problems. The lending companies will have different problems. Your fintechs will have different problems. Your payments processors or payment companies like a phone pay or a GPay will have different sort of problems. Your companies in the B2C space, like your Twitter or Amazon e-commerce companies, have different problems. It all boils down to your segments and you defining who would be my right segment, right? So, for example, what actually in this case people wanted was a good embedded experience because it's a ERP, it's a CRM. They were embedding payments in their own flow. They wanted their problem statement was that current set of processors are not white labeling. So if I'm using PayU or a BillDesk, I have to basically show their logos, etc. Do exactly as they say, etc. I don't have a native experience. I don't have an embedded payment experience. So typically who smaller platforms or merchants who are very conscious want to give an extremely good customer experience are the ones who value this capability, right? So that is the kind of problem statement you have to go down in terms of narrowing. It narrows your scope, but which is what you have to align your leadership and cross-functional teams. So, for example, in this entire scenario, the case studies that I was covering or the scenarios, you end up with a bunch of problem statements. A lot of the enterprise merchants don't trust your product. It's a new product. They trust your hero product, the legacy product, but they still don't have confidence on your payment stack. Merchants or clients who want embedded core banking, they are the ones who wanted embedded as part of your product, white labeled, right? They wanted native white labeled. Uh, Others basically who don't really care, basically, don't really looking for embedded, want an incentive. Now that incentive could be commercials, better support, success rates, could be anything. Most merchants, because expect basic, when I say operational support, faster query resolution, faster onboarding in some cases, better reconciliation, etc. A lot of the time you realize a lot of the merchants might not even be aware that, hey, I'm not supposed to be settling funds in a specific way. I'm handling funds in a specific way, etc. It could just be that they're not aware, right? And that is also a product team's KRA to drive it to the customer facing teams. How do you ensure your customers are aware about guidelines and compliances? Merchants are, and the other one is basically saying merchants are not fully happy with the card stack, right? Card just commercials, etc. Because UPI is what you have, and they're happy with UPI. They genuinely want to use UPI, right? Commercials are lower, etc. These are your problems, right? Now, as a PM, you really cannot just say, okay, this is what I'm going to build, this is what is going to be sold. You need a buying, right? So, and that is where your entire product discovery, user research, segmentation comes into picture, right? So, as an organization leadership, you take a call. You don't want to learn negative gross margin. That is, if your cost is X, percentage of the transaction is what your price is. You don't want to be giving it 0.9x or 0.8x, right? So you want to give it at the barest of bare minimum, let's say 1.01 or 1.05x percentage, right? You don't want more than a team of 100 ops people sitting and doing onboarding, reconciliation, transaction monitor, right? You don't want basically merchants, and this is the leadership charter, right? They're like, it's okay, we'll lose some customers if required, but you don't want merchants coming back to every day and saying, hey, I want better commissions, better commissions, better commissions. And lastly, you don't want merchants or clients who will be like, I won't settle it to anywhere and everywhere I'm okay. Now, these are tenets or these are calls, which obviously is not going to change every now and then, but it tends to change. It tends to be at least aligned for a quarter or a couple of quarters. And if you as an organization work on OKRs or quarterly operating plans, this tends to be, this is what you define, right? So you basically now keeping all of this, you have a bunch of leadership philosophies or your organization level philosophies, which you build basically a intersection with your own insights. You can't serve everybody on day one. And that is something as a PM, you need to continuously keep hammering down your stakeholders because for them, everybody is a customer. So that is where you have to align. So you focus on smaller and tech savvy merchants who are okay to spend a bit more time integrating or okay to spend a bit more time building out a good native flow basically and can move faster as well. For whom basically experience matters a lot. Because if you look at it, if you're buying from a very old school brand or anything, they don't really care whether you try transacting on a LIC, try transacting with an SBI. They don't care about white labeling because the kind of brand and trust LIC has or or as SBI has, they don't really care about white labeling, right? For them, trust is not a problem. And that is where it becomes very important, right? Experience, right? That is why people want your native experience. They want, okay, cool. I can't just give a random payment gateways branding on my platform. People will not use it. Second is experience. One of the things that you'll realize is how do startups or smaller companies or companies who actually value experience within the ecosystem is who value it with not just UPI cards as well. But since UPI is what you don't want to be like, they prioritizing, that's where you're seeing traction. Improving on merchant onboarding, again, you don't want basically the business team has, you want to be like, we'll improve it, but it's not like it's instant either, right? And that's where your very demanding customers, merchants will be like, cool, I'll wait for 3 to 4 days. I'm okay with it. From an operations, you want to align the team saying, cool, we will automate recon. Again, you can't automate everything on day one, right? There'll be edge cases, corner cases you cannot handle on day one. And it will take time. And you agree that, hey, look, I will want the operations team to monitor those transactions. Where are we settling funds? Who is transacting? Is something going wrong, etc. And you also agree that there will be some set of customers along with the business and operations team. You agree that you will provide priority support for initial few merchants so that they incentivize, etc. The word of mouth spreads. It eventually becomes a very powerful tool to acquire larger merchants. It's a flywheel. And from a core product or the platform, you basically build out the whitelisted flows, which is compliant, which is basically something like dashboard. Even if it is, at least they can flag it off. And you basically choose to work from a core platform on things to improve success rates on UPI, because that's where your adoption is seeing. You want to double down and make sure people continue to use it a lot. And quick wins for cards. When I say quick wins, I don't mean like, like do anything and everything. I mean like sometimes your high ROI features, high ROI fixes, bug fixes as well, right? Improve your card success rates. So you align stakeholders that this is the kind of segment we want to serve, right? And you build a go-to-market saying this is how we'll monitor the transaction. And as a PM, you gather the quantitative feedback. You know, okay, why are transactions failing? What is the issue, etc. Right? You reach out to customers, you reach out to partners, internal users, what's happening, and you prioritize and you roll out, which basically goes into live environment and it becomes a very virtuous loop. Right? And it's very critical in B2B SaaS. I'll just take a pause here before we jump into the, like the last couple of slides. Any questions anybody would have for me? Okay. Sorry, what customization? So customization is good question. Yeah. So I think that is one of the major things that you have to take a call, that even if it is customization, how much how much are you going to customize, right? So you can't really customize the entire stack unless you're planning to build a product like it, which is only going to be sold to enterprises. You can't really customize anything and everything. But yes, sometimes a minor tweak, it could be. So what, those are the two types, what we typically call as uh, specific customization, which you can't really extend. So a merchant or a bank or enterprise customer will ask you a very specific requirement, which nobody else will use, or even if it was maybe max one or two, similar use cases. Second is customization with some more enhancements. It will people ask, okay, give me a better UI. Can you show me a better loading page on payments? Can you give me a better, callback or a, basically a API to do that, or just add some few things on the dashboard. Now, those are good to have features. They aren't really customization, they're more enhancements. Yes. And sometimes the way I look at it is when you are in an acquisition mode, you see that, hey, maybe picking up one small customization is going to get you traction for, or basically get you on board with 2 to 3 large or maybe one more number of merchants, scale merchants. You should definitely go and build it. Again, I'm not saying this is something that should end up taking you 10 days, 20 days of no engineering and product effort. It should be more like, maybe 3 days, 4 days. And again, it depends. If your regular sprints and everything itself is running into like 1 month, etc., and then you're okay with spending, and depends on your bandwidth as well in customization from engineering and product. If you have that kind of bandwidth to address, yes, definitely. But again, good SaaS companies don't customize until unless it's a repetitive ask or something that you're just expediting or you're accelerating your roadmap. Sorry, what kind of automation as a PM director? I didn't understand this question. Gunesh Sindhu, can you, like, if you can just give me a bit more clarity, what do you mean by what kind of automation? I didn't understand. Yeah, cool. I think, yeah, we'll unmute if required. And then, any other questions? Yeah, no questions. Okay, cool. I'll continue. And if any question, I'll be happy to answer later. So one of the things you'll realize that all of this is good in the initial stages, but won't really work well at scale or when you are in the hockey stick curve. So the your 0 to 1, even 1 to 5 or 1 to 10 journey, all of this hacky things will work. But when you start ramping up, you need to start thinking deeper and harder. How will you handle some of these things? So broadly, if I have to bucket as a product manager, you need to look at three things, right? This is on the SaaS side. One, your process side. Trying to proactively understand, okay, what is a risk, what could go wrong in the system, how can people game the system, right? What no, is there any issues that could creep up? Could be from a compliance perspective, regulatory perspective, internally as well, risk perspective, as the team is flagging off repeatedly. That's something that's important. Second is basically your automation, right? Like it or not, these are what typically a lot of the SaaS companies in the back end tend to ignore it, right? And like I've been no, I've been guilty of it as well myself. So simply because you can throw people at the problem, it's very easy to just let it slip to the priorities and focus only on success rates, optimizing, rolling out new features. But if you're looking to scale up and scale up fast, you need to automate things which are extremely repetitive and more importantly, very time consuming. Right? It's not just a cost differentiator, it becomes an extremely good product differentiator at scale because your team basically the costs go down, your acquiring capability goes up because you can pitch more aggressively from a business perspective and from a product perspective as well. A lot of your offline and people can be focused on operations, people can be focused on doing things which are more intelligent than just doing the same repetitive tasks. Third and more importantly is setting a process. So like it or not, one of the key critical elements of the program is setting up SOPs at each stage. How are you going to onboard? How will you monitor transactions? How will you launch a new product? How do you pitch? Doesn't mean you have to work on everything, but you are basically the core because as a PM in a B2B SaaS or even a B2C SaaS, you are the one driving everything. So you need to basically align your stakeholders with the proper SOP, right? And they will in turn align stakeholders or users externally. And from a product, the platform perspective is to engage constantly with your engineering and QA counterparts, understanding success rates, your load testing, fix issues, could be bugs. Sometimes there is an edge case, you've ignored it, etc. That's important. Right? That's very, very critical because that's a challenge because at scale, moment something start breaking, your TAT starts going down, your enterprise customers will churn. Right? And customers who really, really value your product, your experience will churn out, if not immediately, over a period of time. Second is being proactive. If you see that there is latency creeping up, you see that your team is not pitching properly, your performance metrics are going down, or your onboarding metrics are going down, your TATs are going down, the TATs are going up, etc. You have to be paying attention. You should be basically understanding what's happening and try to fix it before it goes out of control. Because one fine day, one large enterprise customer can come guns blazing to stack and just go into pieces. Third is talking, right? So as I covered, a lot of the PMs tend to just talk when there's a release going on or there's a new feature going on. They tend to ignore constant engagement. So talk to your stakeholders constantly. When I say constantly, it depends on how agile you are as a company or how much in the thick of things you are. So it could be sometimes even weekly. In the initial stages, it could be even like bi-weekly, alternate days, even daily if required. But talking is very critical because chats, email beyond a point won't work. Same thing with customers. Even if you can't directly talk, make sure that the questions that you have are basically addressed by your clients. Lastly, people, right? So again, alignment is not a one-time activity where you align people and just let it slip through the door. You have to constantly keep on aligning people. And it's all the more critical for scale. And as a PM in 0 to 1, you're more obsessed on launching things, fixing things, enhancing things. At 1 to 10, that's what you're doing. At 10 to 100, it's mostly about alignment, alignment, alignment. How do you make sure your team is, as I covered, pitching properly, documenting properly, and guiding customers properly? Are customers understanding your documentation, flows, etc. Try to understand incentives and what is the skill sets of your cross-functional stakeholders, right? So as I was saying, the business team sometimes won't pitch unless they have a vested interest, right? Or they try. Sometimes you need to understand the incentives and vested interest of your customer side, especially true in a enterprise kind of a B2B SaaS or enterprise customer side. Without that, you won't really be able to influence them. And lastly, the same thing which I was saying, just like talking, moment you see there is some disconnect, there is some challenge, address it. It could be any kind of a thing. And sometimes it could just be on a regular call, huddle, just get people on a quick 15-20 minute call or a 30-minute call, tell people this is what we're doing, this is what we're not. So, and how do you actually do it? Right? So one regulatory. Keep understanding the new guidelines that are coming up, which could be from regulators like RBI, SEBI, IRDI, insurance space, SEBI for the investment space, any other guidelines that are coming up in terms of your uh, from the regulators, right? Second is your operating guidelines. When I say operating guidelines, this could be what is decided by NPCI, what is decided by your bank partner, what is decided by a network like Visa, Master, Amex, etc. They recommend you have to do encryption in a certain way, you have to do this in a certain way, not store it in a certain way. You need to be always staying ahead of the curve. That's how you'll be able to predict what can go wrong. Try to be aware of what's happening in terms of new trends, new products that's going out, what's a new trend. You see that new kind of, products are going out, new kind of customer journeys are being built out. You need to be aware, right? And if you're somebody at a decent enough scale, you can engage with regulators, you can engage with, a lot of banks, large banks, etc., directly as well. Lastly, internal compliances. Of course, is more true for once you're live. Once you're live at a bit at more at scale, your team basically start putting checks and balances. The second is a market. Trying to understand, okay, what's happening at ecosystem. A very good example is you'll see credit cards, which had basically tapered off for a while, have now started taking off again. On the other hand, your debit card market is on a downward trend, right? You see that UPI is taking over, your transaction sizes are also increasing. What most of us were doing, like, 40, 50 rupee transaction 3 to 4 years back, or even 100, apart from the UPI mandated use cases. People are very comfortable doing like 2,000, 3,000, even 10,000, 20,000 credit card payments, etc. That's a massive change, right? Try to understand again what's happening. When I say new product, it's not always something that will impact you directly. Let's say tomorrow, you might not even have built anything on the card side, but tomorrow you have a new product, card-based mandates that's going on, which can potentially impact your existing product. So that is a second order that you should be aware. Similarly, being aware of new platforms, protocols, like in the payment space, you're building a SaaS, you need to be aware, okay, there's a new product going out, there's ONDC, there's account aggregator, your entire open stack going out. How is it going to impact you positively or adversely? There's DigiLocker going out on the KYC side, there's the healthcare stack, there's the entire, open protocols from the government that's going out. Lastly, competition. Like it or not, B2B SaaS is not always a game of just fancy user experience. It's also about what is it that your competitors are doing. The third is basically a customer. When I say customer, it's your target segment customers. Who are these customers? How are they evolving? What are their personas? The buyer personas, the user personas. Are they behaviorally changing? Is there the way they use products, like I was saying, changing? So his legacy, if you've seen, everybody who at one point wanted a white labeled experience, at one point wanted APIs. Now people are like, hey, I don't even bother wanting to do. I'm okay living with certain level of, white labeling, but that's fine. Give me an SDK. Right? People are not ready, no longer ready to spend a lot of bandwidth on product, on engineering, on rolling out features which are not extremely core, which is what the case is in the case of many times in the payments. That's why you don't see a lot of white labeling in the payments, right? You do see PG names, you do see brand names of payment aggregators, payment gateways, like Razorpay constantly cropping up. Largely is basically what is purchase behavior. What are people looking for in a product? What is happening in terms of, when people are evaluating your product, how do they look at purchase? When I say it's not just commercials, but what are the bells and whistles they expect? What is their success rates? What is the product metrics they have in mind? Right? It could, because your segment might, or your basically sector will have different expectations. Somebody might say, I want very fast onboarding. Somebody might say, I want very good success rates, but I'm ready to pay a premium. Somebody might say, I want very, very fast settlements. I'm ready to pay. That's something you need to be aware of. Yeah, so I think so condensing all of it, it all boils down to just one major thing is planning. So how do you plan for things which you can plan? How do you plan for things? And there are some things which honestly you cannot plan always, right? Like many times we think we can plan, but it doesn't really happen. But where you can, you should definitely be able to at least plan and proactively address. So that's the end of the presentation. Right. Common. White label PGs are no, they are common in the initial phases when a new aggregator or a PG is basically launching, but at scale, the commercials don't make much sense, right? Because you don't want to be paying a lot of money, etc., to your customers or other partners, sorry, because your margins also goes for a toss. And keeping that in mind, any job as a PM? Yeah, there is a lot. I think I've also posted on LinkedIn job as a PM, course, etc. I think there are a lot. I mean, of course, I will not be the right person. I don't think it's been a while. Books, I can send it out. I'll share it with the IPL team and they can send. I have written a bunch of books actually on, in the sense, articles on which books to read. Yeah, anybody? Right. Yeah, there are some tweaks required for the PPT and we'll send it out. Any other questions for me? Any feedback? Anything people have to say? Hey, it's actually not that hard transitioning from engineering to PM. It just becomes a matter of aiming at the right set of companies. So preferably to go behind companies which are very tech savvy or tech focused. Like your SaaS, B2B SaaS is definitely one of those kind of companies where people are very choosy about PM knowing APIs, PM knowing all of that. So it becomes a very common thing actually. So B2B SaaS is a good place to start. Second is basically any kind of engineering heavy roles or in larger companies or in PM also like the platform side where you don't really need a lot of prior PM experience, but you need a good data or a technical background. I would say that is another place. So functional PM is possible, but it's easier to transition to technical and then get into techno-functional. That's what I would suggest. It's not impossible to go into techno-functional, but as I said, most good companies and even SaaS companies would, larger ones, enterprise ones would prefer that you have some kind of prior experience, etc. It's not like because they can afford slightly people with budget wise, experience wise also they're able to attract candidates. They'll be like, cool, I'll wait it out. So suggestion aim for smaller companies for a techno functional role or somebody who wants a brand, etc. Aim for a technical or a more back end or a platform kind of a PM, etc. And you should be able to. Any other question? Anything? Like was the session helpful? Was this something that people got a sense? Would love to get a sense if anybody has any feedback, can share us. Yeah, I am done. Thank you, everyone. Hope this was helpful. And yeah, if you have any questions, you can always share it with our team, and yeah, I try to answer. Thank you. Yeah,
Thank you, Gautam, for that insightful session. You provided some great insights. We've enjoyed having you here with us today. It has been a complete pleasure. Please accept this certificate of appreciation from the Institute. The QR code on the certificate will take you to a dedicated Hall of Fame page created for you with the recording of this session. We will also be sharing the webinar recording on our YouTube channel as well. We would appreciate it if you could share it with your network.
Right.
Thank you for the session, Gautam.
Thanks,
And to,
everybody.
and to all our attendees, we've got something cool that we know you'll love. It's our newsletter called the Product Pulse. It's a treasure trove of product management, strategy, and leadership tips and insights. Subscribe to stay updated with the product community. We also host various knowledge sharing events like today's. You can keep up to date with them with the link in the chat. Thank you all for joining in once again. I'll wait here for a few seconds to let you all go ahead and scan the QR codes on the screen to leave any reviews, feedback, or queries. I'll just wait here for a couple of seconds.
I will then drop off everyone. Yeah.
Yes.
Good
Thank you,
evening.
sir. Thank you, Gautam.
All the best. Thank you. Take care. Yeah. Thank
Thank you. I think that should be enough time for you guys to have scanned the QR code. A final thank you for giving us your valuable time, and I'm sure you've had a fruitful time at today's session. I look forward to hosting you in the future. On that note, I'll end the session. Thank you, everyone. Have a good rest of the evening.